Hello everyone, it's your favorite West Virginia Space here, and sorry, this is a bit of a rushed video. I haven't exactly had proper time to come up with my work on my normal videos, but this whole thing bothered me so much, and it's not just this one video. It's the whole attitude and such I've seen building behind it. It's not even so much specifically him, but I'm getting sidetracked. Today, as I'm talking about the video made by Dave Thaumavore, look, I can never say that right. I'm just gonna call him Dave. Called Wizard of the Coast D&D is done. 15 reasons to move on to other RPGs. Now, it's no secret to those that watch my channel or know me personally. I am a big fan of D&D, specifically 5e, although I have played 3.5. I do not consider 6e D 5e, but that's a different point. Is that fundamentally I'm a big fan of it, right? I'm not sure if it's necessarily my favorite. It could be one of the World of Darknesses games, but that's besides the point, or GURPS maybe. But is that I'm a big fan of it, right? And I get incredibly annoyed when I seen the rise of like people who hate on D&D 5e for dumb reasons or reasons that are hypocritical and don't make sense. There's like two flavors of it. One of them is, well, actually, I don't know. That requires a longer breakdown, but the point is, I want to go over why this video is poorly constructed, and in fact, actually is either wrong or just blatantly kind of makes stuff or wrong or incorrect information. So, and just to be clear, although I'm going to hate on him a lot in this video because I hate this, I don't hate him as a person. I'm subscribed to his channel. I like a lot of his videos, even though if I disagree with most of his opinions. Don't go on a harassment campaign, but this is, I'm criticizing his video because it is, well, I'm going to be honest, stupid. So, let's begin. Now, I'm not going to go over each of the 52 points individually. I'm just not going to do that. I do believe you should watch the video the entirety of the video he made, especially the first part and the ending section, because he kind of broke it into the three main categories of his points. If you watch a lot of his videos, I don't think you need to see the third section so much, and if you know about his opinions on Wizard of the Coast, then you don't really watch the second section too much. But if you have any clear idea of what's going on or just want more info, please just watch the whole video. Like I said, I'm not a fan of spreading misinformation, but I'm also not going to be doing a total recap of every single point, and you're going to kind of see why as I get into them. Now, he breaks down his points into three categories. 1, D&D is tired. 2, Hasbro sucks. And 3, there are many better games. I'm going to kind of go over them in a loose order, starting rather weirdly with the second category of points. And yes, there's a bunch of sub-points under them, but they all kind of fall into the same thing, so there's no way to get into specifics there. Once again, just watch the video for more details. Is that his entire point about Wizard of the Coast being a bad company is, and I'm gonna be honest here, I don't particularly care. Because A, it doesn't actually affect the game itself. The rules are the rules regardless of the game. Trying to pin the bad actions of a company on its game is rather silly. If you don't want to support it, that's fine, I guess, but the point is, you can't blame the game for it, which is what he kind of does here, He kind of floats around between whether he just thinks you should not support because it's made by a quote-unquote bad company, or he actually seems almost like contaminates the game itself in a way I don't perfectly understand. But overall, I just don't really care. And this whole attitude that he has, and a lot of other people like him have, it's not just him, not by a mile, that indie is good, no, corporate does not equal bad, indie does not equal good. It's just not a thing. That dichotomy does not exist. And what he considers indie is very weird. Like, I think he kind of considers Call of Cthulhu by Chaosium to be indie, which I have to say, indie by what metric? Call of Cthulhu is almost as old as D&D is, and it has a long-established company. It's like, is indie just everything that isn't Hasbro? That's a very weird metric to work off of, I'm not going to lie. But I can't be entirely certain of that, so I won't make hard claims on that one. Going back to the first category point of D&D is tired, is basically his points are just kind of stupid. Like, the actual very first point he makes is that the D20 system is boring, and it's old. He calls it old and tired, although he says, oh, old isn't bad, but then uses that as an insult, which, first of all, once again, going back to Call of Cthulhu, that game hasn't changed since the 70s in a lot of ways. Yes, it has new additions, but the overall rules stay the same, and no one complains about that. And the thing is, the D&D D20 system is so popular, or at least was for a while, because it's so simple, but yet so elegant. It's attribute plus skill, roll a D20. It's not hard to understand. Anyone can figure that out. It's fun, it's intuitive. Isn't necessarily the best? Well, that's a matter of personal opinion. I don't even know if I consider it the best system. But the point is, it's a solid one. It's worked since literally the 60s or 70s, so it's not so it works. Like a lot of these newfangled systems, I don't think will stick around. I don't think you'll see a lot of the newer dice systems coming out sticking around like the D20 did. And it's a tried and tested system. It doesn't mean you have to like it or think it's the best necessarily, but the argument is kind of stupid. It's just, it works. Another point that he makes is that it's overcomplicated, which is D&D 5e overcomplicated? There is layers to that argument, in my opinion. You see, there's this concept called complexity and depth. You want the maximum amount of depth for the minimum amount of complexity. This is a more term usually described in video game spaces, but I think it's relevant here. You see, there is like a ton of races, and actually there's only like 13 classes, but a ton of subclasses, and like other feats you could take for a character, right? But the thing is, fundamentally, if you're building your character, it's fun to read them all, and it can be kind of overwhelming if you don't know what you're doing. But fundamentally, it's not that hard to pick up on. A lot of the subclasses are very particular archetypes in ways that you would, like, if you want to play, like, a fighter, but he has some access to magic, you pick the Eldritch Fighter. If you want to be a paladin, but he's, but he likes nature, then you pick the Oath of the Ancients, etc., etc. The subclasses being so archetypical make them easy to understand. Generally speaking, if you have a character ID in mind for a character, you probably can very quickly, or at least logically, come up with what subclass they belong to. So the hundreds of subclasses I think it has are not as overwhelming once you understand fundamentally that it's all about building your character like you want to. In fact, having so many subclasses makes that better, because I can tell you, as someone who played with just the core book or from personal use or own for a long time, when I come with character ideas, they were often limited by only having a few subclasses. Now I have pretty much all of them, and I can tell you that I can create a lot more diverse and interesting characters that way. Now, of course, you could also go this into an argumentative about, is class systems good or more like skill-based systems, and that's a different discussion, but also one I'm going to come back to of why I don't think specifically the video can use that as an argument against D&D 5e. We're going to get back to that. As to races, I do or species is sometimes called now, but I'm a true 5e player to the end. So, as with that, that's a little bit, it's actually kind of simple as that. But I do agree having a setting that has so many of them everywhere can feel a bit overcrowded, and I do agree with that. I think also is that, like, one thing they've always stressed is that, like, in your settings, you don't have to have all the races be present. They don't all have to be there. You don't have to represent them. And you can just deny some of the players. You don't want to play a game with centaurs or player characters? Boop! Nope, not there anymore. You know what I mean? We don't have to, they aren't here. They aren't player options. And that's actually another thing that should be stressed. If you don't like a spell or a race or a subclass or whatever in D&D 5e, the GM can just say, nah, it's not here. The game has encouraged that attitude for a while outside of Adventure League, but who follows Adventure League's rules anyway? And once again, no one can stop you. Wizards of the Coast can't send people to break down your door if you don't play with all the subclasses or the races. Literally, they can't do that, and they wouldn't even if they could, probably. That's, I guess, a little bit up in the air, but the whole point is they can't, so it's a moot point. And other complaints that he makes about, like, D&D just being about combat are just silly. D&D is literally the first RPG, and 5e is very close to its original style. How has that become relevant? Because RPGs used to be built relatively consistently off of the idea that there was 3 core pillars of play: combat, exploration, and social encounters, or encounters, or social roleplay, however you want to word that. The term kind of changes. And one of the problems, I believe, with a lot of RPGs today is that they focus so heavily on one that they fail to understand that it kind of lopsides them. I'm looking at you like all of the Power by the Apocalypse games. And where this comes back to, though, is that some of these things need more rules than others. You don't need more than some basic checks to do more social encounters, but for combat, that can be a lot more tricky, especially if you want to have players with tons of options and things to do and all that jazz. So, the combat needs more rules. However, people who just read a rule book and just do page counting rather than actually digesting the text will interpret that as D&D as a combat game, when it is focused around combat, but only about as much as you want it to. I would say to play a normal-ish D&D game, you would need to have a fair bit of combat in it, but not like to overwhelming amounts. Like there was a huge spectrum between like having enough combat to reasonably consider a quote-unquote normal D&D game and just a dungeon crawl hack and slash that has like no roleplay or no explanation either, though a dungeon crawl with no exploration would be rather boring. And all this kind of comes back to just, and then there's just like, I think it kind of pissed me off the most, but actually maybe in this video, is they said that D&D is too hard to get into for new players. I call BS on that, because millions of people have gotten into it easily. And is there things that take some time to learn? Yeah, but name something that doesn't. And he says like, oh, but if D&D was easy to understand, then there would be so many videos how to explain it. No, the reason those so many exist is actually quite simple. D&D is popular. People like to watch content about the thing they like, so more people are encouraged to make those content. That's why there's hundreds of D&D channels, but very few about more indie RPGs. Not as many people care about them, so less videos get made about them. And even more so is that if you actually, listen, I am a person who likes those videos a lot. And I can tell you from personal experience, I don't watch most of them, especially now, to learn anything. I like the personalities. I find them entertaining. That's why I like some of these YouTubers who do it more than others. And it's all about what I consider kind of entertaining, not so much because I need to understand the rules. If someone asks me to make a character, I don't need to go search up a YouTube tutorial. I haven't needed to do that in forever. And the only reason I did ever need sometimes some help back then was because I'm kind of bad about following instruction manuals and that kind of thing. And here's the thing, I am notoriously bad about reading instruction manuals and that kind of thing. I oftentimes need someone to, tell me how to do it personally, or see a video of it, or just learn through brute force trial and error. And the fact is that I could mostly easily understand how D&D characters were made when I was 10 maybe or something like that, less, combined with all those issues I have. There's no excuse why most people couldn't figure it out. And if you can't figure it out, there's videos because there's no shame in needing some help. And the thing is, all this complexity that he complains about serves a purpose. It adds depth to the game. But we'll get into that in the next point. Now, this part of my video is loosely going to cover his entire point and some of the ending bits about where in his section how he had the whole there are many better games than D&D, which there's no point even going over the list. If you want to, he has the list in the video down in his video if you want to see all of them, and that's fine. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. I don't really care. But the point I get is, and listen, I'm not going to criticize those games, at least for the most part, right? Because there's so many different varieties of them. And that's the thing. I have nothing against having more RPGs than D&D. Quite the contrary, I like a lot of them. I love learning about them. They are fun and interesting in their own special way. However, just because, if I was going to make a comparison here, right? Just because chocolate, vanilla, or rocky road, or whatever exotic flavors, or more exotic flavors, I guess, chocolate, vanilla, are exotic, but you know what I mean, flavors exist, that doesn't stop vanilla ice cream from being good. And D&D is the vanilla ice cream, and a pretty damn good one at that. And that's the thing, right? Is there other things that RPGs do better than D&D? Yes. Is there reasons that are playing RPGs to play RPGs that aren't D&D? Totally. Is it possible that D&D isn't the best RPG, or isn't even your favorite RPG? That's perfectly fine. It might not even be mine. I'm kind of up in the air on that. But what I'm getting at, though, is that it is a very solid RPG that I think failing to, I don't want to say respect, but understand in the RPG space has led to a severe damaging of RPGs themselves, as we kind of forget our roots, because D&D is the start of it. I think the greatest way we can see that is how so many people today call D&D 5e too complex. It's too complex. It has too much stuff going on. When, first of all, if you do any research into RPGs that were popular from the 70s, 80s, so many of the early stuff before the slimmed down, very sleek and simplistic RPGs kind of became in fad, you would never call D&D 5e complex again. Ever. I dare you to look at Phoenix Command or some of the Gamma World games and stuff like that, and I dare you to then look at D&D 5e and look at me in my cold dead eyes and tell me D&D 5e is one of the most complex RPGs out there. It's just not. That is is a completely untrue statement by any objective reasoning. But the thing is, D&D 5e is not complex to be complex. There are many things in this world that are complex to be complex, but D&D 5e isn't one of them. And why is that? Because all of its complexity serves a very serviceable purpose. Having so many races is so you can have, well, many different kinds of species and fantasy tropes to play. If I want to play a human, or an elf, or a sea elf, I really like sea elves, or all these other kind of things, right? That you can do, right? That, granted, can get overwhelming, but just have the GM just, like, not all worlds have all these races, especially if you're doing homebrew, which you should be. If all the classes, there's only 13 classes. I don't, like, literally, they've only added one class, maybe 2 or 3 if you count the Blood Hunter and the Mystic, but the Mystic is never really finished, so, and the Blood Hunter basically is a class, I guess, so like 14-ish, maybe. I mean, the number could be anywhere from 13 to 15, depending on how you want to count it. Official classes, that's not hard at all to remember with even basic information. It's not, it's like literally, it's not, 13 or 14, it's not that hard to remember. And while there are tons of subclasses, as I went before, it's in the effort of giving players the most kind of characters to play. It also is not that hard because not every class has all those, like, 100-something subclasses. Most only have somewhere around 5 to 7 the complete set from 5 until, like, the end, from 5e from the start to the end until it ended with 6e, which I hate. So it's not that hard to remember. There are, I don't know how many feats, and I'm not even going to try to count them. And though they can get overwhelming, they are, it's usually you kind of know what you want, kind of like subclasses you want to pick up. But also, all these things serve a purpose, letting you build the character you want to within a pretty wide margin. There was a ton of flexibility and character creation within D&D 5e that is not seen in most other RPGs. Like, people talk, like, for a class-based RPG, because D&D is the class-based RPG, right? The classic race-class combo. But between your race, your class, your background, basic role-playing, tons of feat and options and customization within those classes, even for the marshals that usually don't have as much compared to, like, spellcasters, you can build all kinds of characters mechanically different from each other, and that's to say nothing about role-playing different characters. Because, two fighters may both be fighters, they may even be, like, the champion fighter, but one, they can all be different things, right? All these things work, and they let you build the character you want to within a pretty wide margin. Because one thing he says that, oh, D&D is just superhero fantasy. No, it's not. It literally isn't. It doesn't incline best to that kind of thing a little bit. Yes, that's true. But it's not hard or even breaking things to run D&D as sword and sorcery fantasy, or He-Man style adventure, or dark, gritty political intrigue on the noble courts, or criminals in the muck dealing with whatever were-rat is down there again. Or even something crazy like Glory Hammer. You know there's rules for sci-fi stuff in D&D 5e, right? You can run Glory Hammer. That's all I'm saying. That should be enough to sell anyone at any RPG. It's Glory Hammer. You can run it as Glory Hammer. And, like, but why is this special D&D 5e? Doesn't other RPGs have character creation this vast and interesting? Not universally. Some do. Some have a wide character creation as well. Stuff like Call Cthulhu, Traveler, and even some of the World of Darkness has a surprising amount of flexibility, which is also kind of interesting because those are also the other big RPGs historically. It's almost like maybe being able to create a ton of different fun and interesting characters that fit within the world is a prerequisite to making a good RPG, and that's why these small indie RPGs never break out in a lot of cases because they are very limited. And this is where I'm going to kind of make a jab at some of the RPGs that the guy who made the video, David, actually does like, and this is more about the RPGs themselves, is that a lot of them are very limited. I've ranted about this at Power by the Apocalypse case many times, but a lot of RPGs are super limited these days. And I don't mean this as they have one particular setting or anything like that. I'm not one of those people. Is that they have very limited characters. People used to complain that the difference between the class-based RPG and the skill-based RPG was that class-based characters were more restrictive than skill-based characters. And while this is broadly true, and I will not deny that, it just is a literal fact, especially if your class thing only has limited options. But I think there needs to be a new third category for, like, playbook RPGs, because so many of these newer indie RPGs coming out are so hyper limited that with any degree of moving outside of its quote-unquote intended space would cause massive issues. Like, and I've told this story before, but I'm gonna say it again here because it deserves repeating. I played once Monster of the Week, right? and I wanted to play basically Kitten from Hunter the Parenting. And I tried to build him. I picked a playbook that I thought was closest, but I was always fighting the game to play the character I wanted to. You should not be fighting the game to play a pretty archetypical character. Kitten is not a super, unique style character, especially at the point in the Hunter the Painting series when I wanted basically to play a character like him, because he wasn't as fleshed out as he was now, or unique in many ways. That should have been difficult, but it was. I was fighting against the game to play a archetypical character. If this was a D&D, if we just some issues, this wouldn't have been a problem, despite being a class-based RPG. You could make all kinds of arguments for what Ken's class would be, but that's not the point here. Actually, that is kind of the point, is that you have interesting choices that aren't nearly as restrictive than a Power Play Apocalypse game that I think is the closest to being defaultly good. And this isn't even coming, by the way. I'm not like I said, I like ID5e a lot, but it's probably maybe not even my favorite RPG out there. But I hate when people lie about it, when they make stuff up or just say stupid things. And I think maybe I wouldn't have made this video at the end of the day if it wasn't for the fact that the ending bit where he just goes off on insulting people who like D&D 5e. Dude, you're not gonna win up anyone like that. Especially because it's just constant marketing. Like he said, the second you get a taste of other RPGs, you're never going back. It's like that's not the attitude of someone, or someone who has an opinion that's very, objective in many ways. That's the attitude of someone who just has a hate for something and hates anyone who likes that thing. And, so, sorry, dude, but, I gotta call you out here because your points are wrong. Once again, none of this thing, and you, or the guy who made the video, and you as in the audience, or you, the guy who made the video, or anyone else in the world has to like D&D. But don't go out lying about it. Lying about stuff is stupid and wrong, and it helps no one. And not understanding why D&D is the way it is will not help you make better RPGs. In fact, if anything, the growing misunderstanding of how D&D works, how its core concept works, has only led to worse RPGs overall. And granted, are we in a better state in the RPG community than the days when everyone was just trying to copy D&D with very minimal changes? Oh, definitely. Without a shred of doubt in my mind, we were in a better space in the RPG community. But this growing just hating on D&D is so stupid, and it's helping no one. It's becoming a massive pissing contest with people, where people want to say, oh, how indie my RPG is, my RPG does this, it's becoming this massive thing. But my final point for the video is a bit of a calmer one, but a bit more, I think, important one, is that in the video, David compliments constantly how other RPGs are more creative than D&D. And there is some element of truth to that, how D&D tends to favor a more standard fantasy thing. But I think he undervalues the point of homebrew. How you are in many ways supposed to maybe not create your own characters, your own settings, your own stories, your own campaigns, your own world. Because even if you play in a standard setting in a game, you will inevitably end up with a different world than someone else could be. Maybe you want it a little darker. Maybe you change the royalty of someplace. Maybe it's massive change. Maybe it's small changes. I've told this story once again too, but in Scion, I took a character that was not very fleshed out, but had a little bit of a story to him, the prince, and I turned him. I actually owe so much to the player characters, how he ended up becoming this sympathetic, if somewhat egotistical character wanting to overthrow Zeus, his dad, and gain his place. And I did that, and that was homebrew in many ways. Obviously, I took inspiration from the mini scenario created in Scion, but so much of it was creative storytelling with me and my players. And I think it's undervalued, because D&D is great at that. There are, if you take so many of the current indie RPGs out there, they are so hyper-specific that there's less room for player creativity. And to some degree, that's fine. If you're playing in a specific setting, that's obviously going to limit things, and that's fine. If that world has a specific tone, that's fine. But when you kowtow that these hyper-specific things are better than this broad thing, it's not very objective, and it's kind of stupid. It's like people who try to criticize GURPS for being a generic system. It's is there strengths to a super specific setting or game? That's true. But fundamentally, though, it's a little less creative. And I think the RPG community has always been built on creativity. which I see dying with this attitude slowly, bit by bit. The need to have every book spell out everything. You need to have your characters predefined in nice little archetypes that you can't even break away from. You need to have the stories planned out, to have all these things planned out, more planning out, more. Everything needs to be following a script, a character arc, all these things, right? No less room for creative storytelling and player freedom. That's what I hate about this more than anything. It's the rise of this uncreativity in the RPG space. How all we do is just mindlessly say, this is creative, why it just does random stuff, and it has sometimes very little value of its own. It just makes things objectively worse. And it's sad that we see the death of good creativity. But I don't want to be a downer on this, but that's kind of the end of the video. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. People know from my Shadow Dark video, I am more than willing to get into controversy in the RPG space, but or say controversial opinions, I guess. But I do want to hear your opinions of it, your thoughts and all that jazz down below. What you think about this whole mess, what you think, just your thoughts on D&D in general and the state of RPGs we're kind of in, because I think it's a complicated issue that I think is kind of getting worse, and I hate to say that because there's so much creativity, but yet so little of it is good. Anyway, though, that's just my opinion. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you all next time.
Yeah. Hey, why don't you hit that sub button? You're gonna become a subscriber. Get to see my content quicker. Wouldn't that be nice? I bet so.